Hi everyone, welcome to A Psychology. I'm Miss M, and today we are talking about Fagen's study on elephant learning. In order to understand this study, you have to know what operant conditioning is, and more specifically, positive reinforcement, because positive reinforcement was used to train elephants in this study. Now, operant conditioning basically just means to learn through the consequences of our actions. We can have positive or negative reinforcement, and we can have positive or negative punishment. Positive means to give something, and negative means to take it away. Reinforcement means that we want the behavior to continue, and punishment means we want the behavior to go away. So if you have positive reinforcement, it means we're going to give you something probably that you're going to enjoy in order for your behavior to continue. Now, if we have negative reinforcement, it doesn't mean anything bad, but it probably means that we're going to take away something maybe that you don't like, such as like a chore or something, in order for your behavior to continue. Positive punishment means that we are going to give something when we want behavior to stop. And a lot of times we categorize this as maybe abuse, physical abuse, or yelling. And negative punishment is when we take something away, probably something that you like, maybe your car keys or a late curfew, if we want your behavior to stop. Now that we have that out of the way, this study, we are talking about positive reinforcement. So we're going to give something to these elephants when they do behavior that we like or that we want to reinforce and have them do it more often. So let's talk about the background of the study, because it's really important to understand why we have such large animals in captivity and why we need to use positive reinforcement to help train them or to help diagnose them. Let's just face it, like elephants are really big creatures, and treating illnesses in elephants is not that easy. So if we can teach them to clean themselves or to keep themselves more clean in specific ways, such as cleaning their trunks, then we could possibly keep them from getting ill. And specifically in this study, we're going to use something called SPR training, and this is just secondary positive reinforcement. And if you've ever trained your dog using a clicker, this is very similar, and let me explain. So let's say that you're training your dog and he sits and you give him a treat. Over time, you can pair that treat with a clicker, and eventually you can take that treat away and just use the clicker as reinforcement. So while the food is the primary reinforcer, the clicker is secondary reinforcer. Now, what is the aim of this study? We're trying to see whether free contact with traditionally trained elephants can be trained to trunk wash using positive reinforcement. Now, we are using controlled observations with a small group of elephants living in captivity who were trained over a couple weeks' time. So our observers watch these elephants and they use a checklist to see the elephant's behavior and basically just watch their behavior over time. And because we had these checklists, it's technically a structured observation. So what is our sample? We have 5 female elephants. 4 are juveniles, and 1 is an adult. And they're all housed together in the same place in Nepal. The juveniles were between 5 and 7 years old, and they were actually born in those stables, and the adult was estimated to be somewhere over 50. And these elephants were chosen specifically for being docile. And we also had to make sure that none of them were pregnant or none of them were looking after calves. And we also had to make sure that their trainers were willing to be part of the study. Now, specifically in the study, you're going to see the word mahout. And this is basically a trainer, someone who rides the elephants, someone who trains the elephants, takes care of the elephant daily. Now, our elephants spent most of their day out in the jungle grazing, and the rest of the day they spent in the stables, leg chained to a pole, and they could walk around approximately 6 to 8 feet. They had a normal diet of grass, and they had access to water when they were out grazing during the day. Let's talk about the procedure. So this training method that we used is called SPR, secondary positive reinforcement, and the item that we used to reinforce our elephants was a banana. The banana being the primary reinforcer and a whistle being the secondary reinforcer. Training was conducted in an indoor area, 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m., and again, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. by a specific trainer with their mahout present. The mahouts stood right by the elephant during the training. They did not make eye contact with the elephant. They did not speak. They did not signal the elephant. And this is very important since there could have been some type of rapport that was created between the two. We wanted to make sure that the elephant was not responding due to their mahout. Instead, they were responding to the trainer. And when I say the trainer, literally like the trainer from the study. And no elephant went longer than 2 days without having a training session. And the elephant could choose to not have a training session that day if they basically just turned around and walked away from the trainer. So the purpose of the training, again, was to have them perform a voluntary trunk wash. And there were specific behavioral steps that they needed to complete, and we basically reinforced those steps along the way. But the first thing we had to do was basically establish this process of pairing the banana with the whistle. And how do you do that? Well, there were basically 3 steps that needed to be performed. First, we had to capture the elephant doing some type of act. We needed to present the banana and blow the whistle. Capture, basically like you're capturing the elephant in the act, doing it naturally. Then there was a lured type of reward where you had to lure the animal into a non-natural position of some type, and then you would give the banana and blow the whistle at the same time and give the reward. The last step is called shaping, and this is basically when we start to narrow in on the behaviors that we really want to see. So when we're doing trunk washing, anything that is close to using the trunk or getting water near the trunk, basically anything that is close to washing the trunk, then we're only going to reward those behaviors. So at first the elephant gets used to the banana whistle pairing, and then we narrow in on the specific behaviors that we want to see by giving those rewards. So let's talk about a few of the behaviors that may have needed to be captured, may have needed to be lured, may needed to be shaped. Behavioral task of saying trunk here. This was for water or saline to be administered to the trunk. The elephant would have to place their trunk on the end of the trainer's hand. And since this was not natural, this would be part of the lure category. Trunk up. And this was to allow the water to run down the base of the elephant's trunk. And the elephant would need to lift its trunk upwards, and then we would give it a reward. This was also a lure. Bucket was also another lure demand. Capturing a reward such as blow, where the elephant had to exhale into a bucket. We basically had to wait for a normal exhale for this to happen in order to shape this behavior. And lastly, the behavioral task of steady. And this was our elephant holding a certain position for a certain amount of time. And this was specifically shaped. And every time we did it, we extended the period of time before we gave the banana/whistle. Now there were 3 other tasks specifically asked of the elephants: targeting, trunk down, and trunk out. But halfway through the study, we for some reason threw them out. We realized they were not essential for trunk washing. After the training was done, the trainer decided to put all of these behaviors together in small sequences. And this is called behavioral chaining. And by performing these behaviors in the correct sequence, that's how the rewards were given. And since we did this for our elephant's health, we also tried to extinguish a fear behavior with a syringe. Let me explain. In the case that we needed to give an elephant a vaccination, typically we saw the elephant very fearful of syringes. So they incrementally put a syringe closer and closer to the elephant's trunk in a desensitization type of way in order to get the elephant more used to the syringe. And if you want to know how did we avoid having the elephant drink the saline water that was meant to wash their trunks, they basically saturated them with water, allowing them to drink a lot of water before the study so they weren't tempted to drink the saline after. Now, an assistant recorded the length of time of each training session and recorded the total number of times an elephant was given a cue. After session 10, elephants were taught approximately every 5 sessions on previously learned behavior. Once an elephant received a passing score of 80%, the training was considered complete. Now, interestingly enough, the 4 juvenile elephants completed this successfully, but the adult elephant did not. And because we know Cambridge is a little tricky, there are some specifics about which elephants passed which tests and which did not, which you'll have to know. And we think due to the age of elephant 5 and possibly some visual impairments was the reason that she did not pass. After 10 sessions, there was a 39% passing rate. But after 35 sessions, it was up to 89% passing. And we concluded that juvenile free contact traditionally trained elephants can be trained to participate in trunk washing using SPR training techniques. And this can be done voluntarily by the elephants while avoiding punishment and has the ability to produce reliable results. Thank you so much for being part of my Patreon, and I hope this video helped you. Don't forget to reach out with any questions or put your questions right in the comments. Controlled observations like this can be easily replicated. But if the study was done with other elephants in the future, we'd have to take their mood into consideration and possibly the type of handling from their mahouts.